The third and final primitive data type we're going to talk about that JavaScript supports are string data types, and we can create strings using either double quotes or single quotes. In this case, I have done both. In the first example, I used double quotes, and I denote the beginning of my string with one double quote and close it with another. In the second example, I use single quotes. Again, I denote the beginning of the string with a single quote and close it with another. And one useful aspect of this is that we can then use things like apostrophes or double quotes to indicate quotations relatively easily within our string. However, what if we want to use both quotations and apostrophes within a given string? Well, this becomes a little bit trickier, but still doable. And we can accomplish this using something called escape sequences. So in this third example, we'll notice that I decided to use single quotes to indicate my string. I still have double quotations within my string, that's fine, but I decide to use an apostrophe S rather than separating out this it is into two separate words. In order to use an apostrophe S in this case, I need to use what's called an escape sequence. An escape sequence is prefaced with a backslash followed by the character that I want to include in my string. And so all I'm telling my JavaScript in my browser is to interpret this quotation, this single quote, as a character within my quotation or within my string rather than as the closing of my string itself. So let's go to the browser and see how all these are rendered in our console. The first string gets logged using the appropriate apostrophe in it. The second string appropriately denotes the quotations in our string, and the third string accurately identifies this apostrophe as an apostrophe rather than the closing of our string. So that all works beautifully. Now let's look at some of the methods and other properties that strings have in JavaScript. The first property we're going to look at is the length property. And for any string, we can assess the length of that string, meaning the number of characters of that string. So I've gone ahead and declared a variable called example string, and I've assigned the value hello to that example string. Then I print out to the console the example string value itself as well as the length of that string. In this case, we'd expect the string to be of length 5 because there's 5 characters within this string. Let's make sure that that's what happens. And indeed it is. It prints out hello to the console first, and then it prints out the length, which, as we expected, is 5. The next thing we'll look at is the includes method. And the includes method allows us to assess whether a particular substring is contained within our string. If it is contained, if it is included in our string, then it will return true. Otherwise, it will return false. So in this case, again, we print out our example string to the console, and then we print out whether or not it includes the substring lo. In this case, we expect it to print true because it does contain the substring lo. Let's go ahead and go back to our browser and inspect the console to make sure that that's correct. And indeed it is. First we log out to the console our variable that contains the value hello, and then we log out that indeed it does include the substring lo in our string hello. Now let's suppose that we want to replace a substring of our string with another substring. How might we do that? Well, thankfully JavaScript provides another method called the replace method. It's very similar to the includes method with the exception that it requires one more parameter. And in this case, we search for the substring lo within our string, and then we replace it with the substring p. And so let's go back to our browser and take a look at our console to see what happens here. We'd expect that our example string would change from hello to help. And indeed it does. We can see that our string changed from hello to help. There are a number of other methods and properties we might want to use with strings, but the last one we're going to cover in this section is the char at method. This method allows us to grab the character at a certain position, a certain index within our string. In this case, I'm grabbing the character at index of 1. Now, let's go to the console and see which character this actually grabs from our string. We may have expected it to grab the H from our hello string, but in fact it grabbed the E. And that's because everything in JavaScript is indexed at 0, not 1. And so within this string, the first character is actually at index 0, and the second character is at index 1. The char at method takes in an index, not the position of our character that we want to grab. And so in this case, I pass in the index of 1, so JavaScript looks, okay, index 0 is H, index 1 is E, I'm going to return E because that's index 1. Hopefully that indexing makes sense, and when we talk about arrays here in a few videos, we'll expand on this concept a bit further. But hopefully this section made you a little bit more comfortable with strings, and we're ready to move on.